Today, we are diving into the story of how Rome was founded. And look, this isn't a story about architecture or city planning. No, this is a story about gods, a lost throne, a wolf, and a deadly rivalry between two brothers. It's the myth that basically defined the soul of an empire for 1,000 years.
So that's the big question, right? How do you build something that massive, something that lasts that long? Well, for the Romans, the answer didn't start with bricks and stone. It started with a myth, a story born from gods, from violence, and from a powerful sense of destiny.
All right, so here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll get into the myth itself. Then we'll look at the first 4 kings who laid the groundwork. After that, the Etruscan influence, which was a real game changer. Then, the dramatic end of the monarchy. And finally, we'll dig into why this whole legend was so incredibly important.
Okay, let's jump right in. Our story starts with 2 brothers, twins, who were said to be the sons of Mars, the god of war. They were abandoned the moment they were born, but it was pretty clear they were destined for something big.
I mean, just look at this chain of events. You've got divine parents, a death sentence, a miraculous rescue by a wolf, of all things, and then they eventually discover who they really are and come back to claim their birthright. This isn't just a fun story. For the Romans, this was basically a divine stamp of approval on their entire existence.
But this amazing destiny came at a cost. After the brothers put their grandfather back on the throne, they decided to build their own city. The problem was, they couldn't agree on who should be in charge, and when Remus mockingly jumped over the new city wall that Romulus was building, Romulus killed him. Just like that. The foundations of Rome were literally laid in his brother's blood.
So the city is founded, and Romulus is the sole ruler. Now begins the era of the first 4 legendary kings. Each one of them is going to add a totally different but totally crucial piece to the puzzle of Rome.
So Romulus is now king. But what is a city without people or laws? He has the walls, but now he has to actually build a society, a community, from scratch. And he has to do it in a city that was, just born out of murder.
And his methods were a real mix. On the one hand, he does some brilliant political organizing. He creates the Senate with 100 elders to give him advice, super smart. On the other hand, he needed people, especially women, so he resorted to some pretty brutal tactics, like opening the city to fugitives and orchestrating a mass kidnapping of neighboring Sabine women. It's this wild combination of visionary thinking and ruthless pragmatism. After the warrior king Romulus, Rome's second king, Numa Pompilius, was a complete change of pace. He wasn't a general, he was a priest. He wasn't interested in conquering neighbors, he was interested in building Rome's soul.
Numa's contribution was absolutely fundamental. He's the one who organized Roman religion, created all the different priesthoods, including the super important Pontifex Maximus, or chief priest. He gave Rome its laws and its rituals. He showed that you could build a stable society with faith and order, not just with swords.
Well, all that peace and piety, it didn't stick around for long. The pendulum swung right back the other way with king number 3, Tullus Hostilius. This guy was the polar opposite of Numa. He was all about one thing: war.
Under Tullus, Rome became an aggressive military machine. He was constantly fighting, constantly expanding Roman territory. He was so warlike, he even destroyed Alba Longa, the city Romulus and Remus came from. This is really where Rome's identity as a dominant, aggressive military power starts to get cemented. So after the warrior, we get the 4th king, Ancus Marcius, and he's kind of like a mix of the kings who came before him. He somehow managed to balance the religious devotion of his grandfather Numa with the military aggression of Tullus. Ancus was a builder, an integrator. He understood that to be a true power, Rome needed more than soldiers and priests. It needed infrastructure. He founded the port city of Ostia, giving Rome access to the sea. He built the very first bridge across the Tiber. These were massive projects that connected Rome to the wider world and set it up for future economic success.
Okay, so Rome has been built by its own Latin kings. But now, everything's about to change. The next series of kings aren't actually Roman. They come from the Etruscan civilization to the north, who were way more technologically advanced. And their influence is going to completely transform Rome.
2 of these Etruscan kings in particular are absolute game changers. You've got Tarquinius Priscus, the great urbanizer, who makes Rome look and feel like a real city. And then you have Servius Tullius, the great reformer, who completely reorganizes Roman society itself. Let's start with Tarquinius Priscus. This guy was all about big public works. He built the Cloaca Maxima, the Great Sewer. Now, a sewer might not sound glamorous, but it was revolutionary. It drained the swampy valley that would become the Roman Forum, the very heart of the city. He also started the Circus Maximus for chariot racing. He literally made Rome look like a capital.
Now, his successor, Servius Tullius, was more focused on people than on buildings. His masterpiece was creating Rome's first ever census. But it wasn't just to count people. He organized all citizens into classes based on their wealth, and this determined everything: your political power and, most importantly, your role in the army. The richer you were, the more you were expected to contribute to the military.
So we've had founders, priests, warriors, and builders. And then we come to the seventh and final king, Tarquinius Superbus, or Tarquin the Proud. He wasn't going to rule through respect or law. He ruled through fear. And his reign brought the whole system of kingship crashing down.
And the end came incredibly fast. The final straw was a horrific crime committed by the king's son against a noblewoman named Lucretia. Her tragic public suicide in protest was the spark that lit the fire. The Roman nobles, totally outraged, led a rebellion, and the people followed. They ran the king and his family out of town, and in 509 BC, after 244 years, the monarchy was gone for good.
So, after all that myth and history, why do we care? Why does it matter? Because for the Romans, this wasn't just some cool story they told their kids. This was their operating system. It was the code that explained exactly who they were, where they came from, and what they believed in. And you can see it all laid out here. Every king gave them something. Romulus gave them their strength. Numa gave them religion and law. Tullus gave them their military might. Ancus gave them infrastructure. And the last kings, the Tarquins, they taught the Romans the most important lesson of all: the danger of absolute power. And this became the central political idea for Rome. They could admit that, yeah, kings built our city, but they were absolutely convinced that tyranny, the kind shown by Tarquin the Proud, was the single greatest threat to their freedom. That belief is what set the stage for the next 500 years of the Roman Republic.
So that's the big question this whole origin story leaves us with. Was Rome's incredible destiny forged by the gods, something set in motion the moment a wolf found two babies by a river? Or was it something much more human, forged by ambition, pragmatism, and incredible acts of violence? That question really echoes through all of Roman history.